Okay, great. We are recording and we are moving. And thank you for everybody for being so attentive and on time. And I will start without any further ado. If you have questions during this presentation, which everybody inevitably does, because it's involved, please put them in the chat box. Just for the sake of flowing. I don't usually do the on calling on hands thing, but put it in the chat and I'll respond to it. Or if it's personal, then let me know and I can respond to it offline. But please feel free to ask questions throughout. As usual, I talk a ton in this presentation and I talk fast, although I really do try and slow it down. So hopefully this will be something that you'll get something out of. And I appreciate everybody coming on Memorial Day weekend. There's probably a lot of people that had other stuff going on, but this is obviously important. It is revisiting the class of 2024 and seeing what we have in terms of results and seeing what that's going to mean for the future. Most of you attending are rising seniors, so this is going to be kind of the immediate future. But for students that are younger than that, things don't change dramatically in college admissions, maybe with the dropping of the SAT, but otherwise not so much. So this is going to be relevant in the forthcoming years. But still, it's nice to see how things lift from one year to the next. Today, what we're going to be speaking about is a few different things. We're going to be speaking about the results and the trends from this year. I give national results as well as our personal company results. Our results are very limited in size, as I've mentioned before. We have about 35 seniors, más o menos, with some transfers. So sample size is limited, especially when you're considering schools like UC. They're getting 140, 150,000 unique applications. Our little sample size doesn't matter much, but it's giving something, and I think it tends to reflect the overall trend of things. So a lot of this for me is kind of like interpolation, where I'm picking things that I've read around and also kind of looking for for patterns that support that. So a lot of it is this is not all objective. Shocking, I know. So we'll go over results and trends from this year, predictions from last year and how they played out, trends for the future, and how I think that those are going to go. And Q&A toward the end. With most of this, I get things out of the way with the results and the trends, and that's the fun stuff that people like to go over. But with results and trends from this past year, let's go over first off how things wound up looking nationally. And nationally, as as a surprise to no one, selectivity is on the rise. One thing that I mention almost annually these days with college admissions is there's a joke with Russian history where like every chapter of Russian history books begin with like and then it got harder and then it got harder. And it's the same thing with admissions, like every year. And then it got worse, and then it got worse, and then it got harder. So this year selectivity is on the rise as per the usual. Interestingly, not with UC, which we'll get to shortly, but with the fancy privates, quite a bit. To give a point of comparison over the last couple of years, you see the way that admit rates, and these are acceptance rates, overall acceptance rates, from including early decision, early action, and regular decision for the past several years for freshman admission. And almost without exceptions, the schools here have gotten more selective. That stops being the case with some of the Ivies. Like Harvard got less selective by 0.5 of a percentage point. 1 year Columbia got less percentage, say selected by 0.2 of a percentage point. But for the most part, things are getting selective more from 1 year to the next. What I find particularly jarring about this stat is that you have a number of schools in here, obviously, that are fancy schools. We've got Columbia, Dartmouth, Georgetown, MIT, Northwestern, Rice, Notre Dame. But we also have, schools in here like BU, and Tufts, And Boston University is getting in the range of Ivy League level of admissibility, 11% admit rate. This is a school that's like number 43 in the country. And they're denying 89% of students that apply, which is nuts. Almost as nuts. Tulane denying 87% of students that apply. They've got their own kind of thing going on, but you get the idea. Things are getting harder, and this lays it out, I think, in stark detail. And when you start thinking about, like, my this is not, everybody. This is not like a cross section of the country that's applying. These are top students that are applying, and still 90% are getting denied to schools outside of the top 40. It gives you a little bit of it gives a real reality check. I was like, yeah, Boston University, number 43 in the country. It's a safety. Well, yeah, but and maybe for some people, but 89% of the students are getting denied, and they don't have idiots that are applying. Um, to continue that and to give a little bit more context, this also kind of puts things, I think, in the reality check, category, where admit rates of schools that are like between low single digits and 15%. You've got your usual suspects in there. I mean, we've got Northwestern, we've got Duke, we've got Vanderbilt, but we've got Northeastern University, which is outside of the top 50, that's admitting at 5%. This is a school that was outside of the top like 120 in the country, about 15 years ago. We have, oh, what else is there? Tulane, as I mentioned before, BU, as I mentioned before, small liberal arts colleges, Bowdoin and Colby, that are admitting in low single digits. USC, which these days isn't a surprise anymore. But if you told somebody 10 years ago that USC would be admitting in single digits, they would have felt that you were nuts. And, tuition and cost of attendance above $100,000, but still have that number of applicants. Crazy. So 5% admit rates used to be the province of the Ivies. 10% admit rates used to be the province of the Ivies not long ago. Like 8 years ago, that most of all the Ivies, I think 8 years ago, for the most part, overall admit rate, maybe a couple of more single digits, but not that many. Now all of them are. In the case of Northeastern, I don't think I mentioned this here. No, I do mention it. In the case of Yale, spike in applications. Not everybody's gone up. Harvard's applications went down this year. But most Ivies know. Yale applications up 10%, admit rate dropped to a below 4%. Duke applications up, admit rates at 5%. Northeastern, almost 100,000 applications. This is a school, as I said, number 53 in the country, and a school whose applications have gone up 53% over the past 5 years. So Northeastern has always been about marketing and about pushing themselves, and pushing the brand. But now it's become, it's really become that way. There's no essay for Northeastern. They're trying to get students to apply. They're bringing students in to deny a good number of them. Penn apps up 10%. Texas apps up now 73,000 students, 11% out of state acceptance rates. I think it's that the top 6% of in-state Texas students, they gotta admit. And for the remaining seats, 89% denial rates for out-of-state kids. Chicago doesn't report their numbers, but for the word on the street, kids talking to AOs after presentations and then like getting the straight dope, about 4% overall, regular and early. Early decision is probably going to be more like low double digits, but overall 4%. So that's what we're looking at with everything, And again, Chicago, it's not like you've got a bunch of meatheads applying. I mean, you've got nobody's applying with like less than a 1450. It's just like, and still 96% of kids that want to like go to the place where fun goes to die. It's amazing. Now a little bit more positive because I set it up this way. Our results, I'd say this year we struck out on HYPS, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, struck out on Caltech, struck out on MIT. For the most part, all the other coveted schools wound up coming through and came through well. Not a lot of overlap here among the students that were successful. A little. but not really tons. We had a WashU and Wellesley that were the same person, but otherwise, largely, I think everybody, maybe the UCs overlapped, but otherwise not much. Penn, two students admitted, again, small group, not everybody applied, obviously. Northwestern, 3 students admitted from our small group. Rice, 2 students admitted. We had one Cornell normal admit and a handful of Cornell guaranteed transfers. 3 students admitted to Carnegie Mellon. One of admitted to the School of Computer Science. Another one admitted from Mission San Jose, which I didn't think was going to happen anytime soon. And Carnegie used to be great with Mission, but I haven't seen them be really, really good over the past couple of years, and it's nice that they kind of came back. Emory got 1, Georgetown got 2, which is good. Georgetown has, historically taken a lot from the Jesuit high schools because it's a Catholic Jesuit school. So you get a lot of the seats at Georgetown getting filled up by kids from St. Ignatius in San Francisco, or Bellarmine in San Jose, or the Jesuit school up in Sacramento. But yeah, did well this year. Neither kid was from a Jesuit school, neither kid from a Catholic school. One from Lynbrook and the other one from El Cap and Merced. WashU, good. WashU's dropped out of the top. WashU dropped out of the top 20, top 25 not long ago, but it's still, I'd say, a coveted school. And it dropped out of the top 25 a while back because they lied to U.S. News and World Report about their statistics. The U.S. News punished them. The same reason that Columbia is not like in the top 10, because Columbia lied about their numbers a while back, and U.S. News used the bully pulpit, so to speak, to knock them down. Wellesley, 3 admits. That was great. And Wellesley's not a popular school around here. It's a liberal arts college. It's a school that's all female. So just restricts half of the applicants right off the bat. It does have a real presence in the Silicon Valley, in spite of the fact that it's a liberal arts college. But it's produced like Madeleine Albright. It produces some just real movers and shakers. So Wellesley, good wins with Wellesley. None early, as I get to in a moment. 2 schools that almost nobody's ever heard of: Franklin W. Olin and Rose-Hulman. Franklin W. Olin in Needham, Massachusetts. Rose-Hulman in Terre Haute, Indiana. Both super duper small, rather selective engineering schools. Those were nice wins. I think we got more than one to Georgia Tech, which is great. Georgia Tech is always awful. Georgia Tech is always awful with boys. We have a Georgia Tech in previous years, but it's typically girls. One of the Georgia Tech kids this year was a boy. UVA, UNC, Toronto, also University of British Columbia, bunch of USC, bunch of Berkeley, bunch of LA, bunch of Michigan, bunch of NYU. So worked out well. I'm especially happy with the top 20 schools. Not many, ED. A lot of kids had these results for RD, so they could compare and contrast what they wanted to. All right, good. Let me see. Oh, that made a noise. Now what? Okay, so after that first trend, so let me see. What do we have for? Oh gosh darn it! Thank you. My voice was going out from time to time for a few seconds. Gosh darn it! All right. Well, let me see. Tell me what I might have missed. With all of these, we've got good results. Here we go. With the but thank you for telling me. If I start going weird, then let me know. Okay, but good. But yeah, good results for the top schools in particular, and I like that students did not need to commit themselves early decision in order to make the majority of these guys work out. Most of them were for regular. All right. So first trend, things got tougher, as always is the case. Is that the Russian history book? And then it got harder, and then it got harder, and then it got worse. It's that way. It's that way for everything, or is it? Computer science this year, not awful. Not that anybody makes a habit of coming to my presentations, but one of the presentations last year, I was just like, and I've been saying it since then. Last year was just the computer science admissions, computer science numbers for UC in particular were horrible. If you speak Spanish, they were awful, terrible. This year, not Not bad. Not bad generally speaking, not bad with UC in particular, which was a shocker. UC was much better than the year before. I think that we had twice the number of kids overall admitted to Berkeley this year than last year, and twice the number of kids admitted to LA this year than last year. Berkeley and LA's apps did not spike; they remained flat. They were one of the few schools that had like no increase, maybe like 1% increase in the number of apps to LA. But UC was good with a number of CS students admitted to Berkeley and LA, EEC students admitted to Berkeley, where we just had one from last year. Data science students, multiple admitted to Berkeley under their new College of Computing and Data Science. It was surprising. I was not unhappy with it. Because this time last year I was crying doom and gloom about the computer science options at UC. And surprising, and this is not meant to get people excited. This is not something I wouldn't bank on it. It's not like computer science stuff is generally getting easier. It's just like for this little sample size, it was good this year. And maybe it's not like, maybe it's not going to be as tremendously bad in the future as it could be. With other schools, I thought that we were going to have problems as well. In the case of Maryland, I thought that we were going to have a lot of problems because Maryland made it very clear over the summer last year that they were going to make computer science admissions much more difficult. Virginia Tech seemed like it was going to get worse. Purdue has been getting bad for a long time, and I thought this year was going to be to continue the trend. All of the schools were not bad this year. We had a lot of students that were admitted to all of these schools. In the case of Maryland, I don't think that we got I don't think we got surprising bad news at all. Everybody that I felt would qualify for direct admission to CS was admitted, and data science, which is under CS at Maryland. So Maryland, in spite of what they said during the summer last year, at least for the students that applied this year, not bad. I don't think it was like a self-selection thing either, a self-selection bias either. Um, as I mentioned, though, in all cases, students want to consider liberal arts colleges in the Silicon Valley. Like I mentioned, Wellesley. Wellesley it put students into Google. The same with Swarthmore and Williams and Harvey Mudd. Statistically speaking, for the size of school they are. Does anybody apply to these schools? Well, in the case of Wellesley, yeah, we had 3 applicants this year, and all of them got in. None of them matriculated. So at least people are considering the schools a little bit more rather than just ignoring them before. Now the next step is to have students actually matriculate, if everything works out. Let me 1 second on this and let me see. Am I in the okay, yeah. All right, good. So good, wonderful, terrific. Just want to double check and make sure I was on the wrong network. This past year in CS, really, you can never be optimistic with computer science. And maybe that's part of it is I've become maybe better at managing expectations and just telling everybody they're not going to get in, and everybody's happy afterwards. But it is something that the results were surprising and in a good way. Man, especially the mid-level publics, the mid-level Midwestern publics were clutch, and UC, believe it or not, clutch this year with CS. Okay, so that's another trend. So trend number 1, things are getting harder. Trend number 2, surprisingly not bad for CS. Trend number 3, and maybe this overlaps with CS, is that the rigor, the difficulty of the curriculum really has become of paramount importance, it seems, to UC. And just to give a little bit of history, and maybe some context, the University of California and the Cal State University system don't look at the SAT or ACT. They're test blind. And UC, and this has been the case for the past 3 or 4 years, UC only looked before this at 14 criteria. Now they look at 13 criteria. The only thing that they can look at that's academic then is the transcript. So, the transcript, it's made up of a number of different things, like the grades, obviously, the number of classes you've taken, and the rigor of classes that you've taken. The rigor of the classes seems to have been a massive tipping point this year for students for UC. And I bring up the context because I guess it makes sense. if the only thing that you can look at is the transcript and you don't look at the SAT score anymore, then everything on the transcript becomes much more important. And if you've listened to things from the inside from college AOs lately over the past several years, one thing that a lot of people are disenchanted with is grade inflation and the difficulty to understand how competitive a student really is, because grades have been going up since the pandemic. So rigor is one way of just making sure that the students' grades really do reflect the difficulty of the classes. So, this is me again interpolating, kind of reading between the data. But rigor, if you're concerned about grade inflation, then you turn your attention to how difficult the kids' classes were. And if the kid had nothing but AP classes and they crushed the AP test, you can't say anything bad about the class. You can't say that it was grade inflation. So again, rigor is, especially in the absence of SAT, it's going to matter quite a bit. So let's look at a couple of illustrations. Massive sample size of 4, where 160,000 applicants to UC, but we've got 4 here that are going to prove my point. Again, a little bit of art here. But to give some illustrations, Adrian, again, names changed to protect the innocent. Adrian, not much of a resume. A STEM program at school. His school had like a CTE ROP type program that they did. That was kind of a cool thing that he did. Outside of that, he had FIRST Robotics, and that was all. Robotics involvement and good robotics involvement, but not like national championships where they do the whole Houston thing and everything. And the STEM program, and that's it. Admitted to Cal EECS with 28 semesters of honors AP. He had other stuff going on, but none of it was that dramatic. It was the volume of coursework that he did at a high level, though, that was dramatic. And to give some context for this, the honors and AP semesters, as I count it here, and as UC counts it, are classes taken between 9th and 12th, so including planned classes, that are AP classes or UC approved honors classes. So 9th grade bio honors doesn't count almost anywhere. 9th grade English doesn't count almost anywhere. Question: are those kids you mentioned Asian kids? Yes, everybody. I don't work with non-Asian kids. It's just that's not by design, but it's just, yeah, we over the past couple of years we'd have like half a white kid. But otherwise, it's all Asian kids. But good, very legitimate question. Totally. With for what it's worth, also just to backtrack. Sorry to give so much context, but I had a cup of coffee and I got to talk a lot, I guess now. Since 1996, UC has not been legally able to consider ethnicity when looking at applications. So, and this is something that they've been pretty. There's the UC has tried to do an end run by considering, first gen college, free and reduced lunch, underperforming schools. But for the most part, UC it's not, it hasn't been, considered. So UC is about as transparent as you get, and it's about as egalitarian as you can get when it comes to ethnicity and admissions. So, kind of coming back to this, so UC honors and AP credit. I'm looking at beginning of 9th to end of 12th, so including planned classes. AP classes count. Every AP class, for the most part, is 2 semesters, not like Gov and Econ, but like everything else is 2 semesters. So if you take 2 semesters of an AP class, you get 2 bonus points here. So Adrian, this kid, between 9th and 12th, took 28 semesters of AP, UC-approved honors, or college coursework, which is a lot. The average for Berkeley and LA are around 23, and that's already super duper high. So 28 is massively high, which accounts for why in part for why the student was admitted. This is also, by the way, reflected in the UC GPA, which weights the honors and AP classes. It is particularly reflected, sorry to get technical, in the UC Berkeley and UCLA calculated UC GPA, because they use an uncapped GPA to evaluate their students. Other UCs, the other 7, will use an 8 semester cap where you don't get any more than 8 bonus points. but for Berkeley and LA, you can add them up ad infinitum. So the UC GPA for Berkeley and LA directly reflects the rigor of the student's curriculum, which is perhaps one reason why this volume of AP and honors classes really plays well with Berkeley and LA, but not necessarily as much with other places. So Adrian, STEM program at school, first robotics, that's all the guys got, Cal EECS. Alan, only thing the guy had some bicycling, not like Tour de France winner. Eagle Scout, great, but not uncommon, and a job. So great, not uncommon. Admitted to Cal, material science and engineering. So, not EECS, but still Cal engineering, 27 honors in the AP semesters. As I said, average for Cal and UCLA, 23. Next to Larry, UCLA CS, with 3 Bs in 10th and a B in 11th grade. And that's something that was a surprise this year too. We had a couple of kids that were just like, they got their GPA, their grades were low, but they were, or the number of Bs was really high, but still they were admitted. And in this case, Larry, 26 honors in the AP semesters. And had some other good stuff, some other good CS stuff, but still 3 Bs in 10th for UC. You're outside of like the top 250 in your class. For UCLA CS, it's tough. But not impossible, but just difficult. Last one, Perry. The only thing Perry had was in Spirit AI and robotics involvement. Admitted to UCLA CS under engineering, of course, with 30 honors in AP semesters, massive amounts. So, that's just got to give you context. So really, I haven't seen any 9th grade honors classes that count for weight, aside from 9th grade bio at Leland. Other side, just to kind of give you an idea, 10th grade Chem honors 2, 10th grade weighted math 2, 10th grade Chinese 4 honors. So now you're at 6 in 10th grade. In 11th grade, let's say you take 4 AP classes and then 2 regular classes. So now you're at now you're at 7 total classes that are AP and honors classes. And in 12th, you take another 5. So with AP class, AP honors class still heavy. So now you're at what is it, 12? 12 honors and AP classes with a heavy schedule. That gets you to 24. This kid's taking 6 semesters more. So, a backbreaker of a course load plus, another 6 honors AP courses. It is something that is impressive. And all of these kids, they all supplemented it by way of college courses. That was while I was doing the review for this. I was really amazed by, I'd forgotten how many college courses some of these guys had taken, and it was a massive number. There you go. Okay. So, with trend 1, as you recall, everything getting harder. Trend 2, not so fast, my friend. CS not getting impossibly harder. And especially not bad at UC. Trend 3, UC, especially for rigor, does kind of give that quite a bit of weight. So now moving on to trend 4, applying early decision, which doesn't apply to UC. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going out of order here, but I did this organically, sort of. Yes, excellent question. Okay, so all right. Does this include 12th grade honors and AP classes, the numbers? Yes, it does include them. So that these numbers here, these kind of 28 semesters, 27 semesters, 26 semesters, 30 semesters, as we'll get to in a moment, 34 semesters. These are all 9th through 12th. So planned classes included. But that's how UC calculates as well. That's one of UC's 13 criteria. Strength of schedule for 12th grades. So it stands to reason that they would consider 12th grade rigor. As I often tell people, if UC is your only goal and like nothing else, UC's and Cal States and that's all, do nothing but AP classes in 12th grade, because UC and Cal States are not going to see the grades. They're only going to look at the rigor, and you just got to you should really get Bs. But yeah, you want to really gun for UC or Cal States, put the pedal to the floor in 12th grade with the honors and AP classes, because it's going to work toward you, but there's almost no way it'll work against you because they're not going to see the grades. So moving beyond that little stratagem, moving on to the 4th trend, as I've identified it. We got 30 trends we'll be going over. I'm just kidding. We got 7, so not that many more. But the 4th trend, applying early, and this is something that this has been a staple of this presentation forever. because colleges like kids that apply early. There's two ways of applying early: early decision and early action. Early decision, the colleges get your money no matter what. Kind of. You could say, if you let me in, I'm going there. If you let me in, I'm paying you. If you let me in, you have me there next year. Um, and that bumps up the chance of acceptance. Early action, it doesn't give as much enhanced chance of acceptance, but you have to do it for public schools. For public schools where you're applying as an out-of-state kid, you got to apply by their early action deadline, their non-binding 11/1 deadline. If you don't, then you're competing for fewer seats against in-state kids, which you don't want to do. So early decision, mostly for private schools. You apply there, you get in, you got to go. What happens if I don't go? Then that college hates your high school for a couple of years. So Mission San Jose, for the student that wound up pulling out on a Northwestern ED agreement, I would not suggest that maybe, you do Northwestern next year for Mission San Jose for ED. Same thing with anywhere, that you pull out of an ED agreement and the university will salt the earth and burn the crops for a couple of years. So early decision, committing yourself, got to go there if you get in. Early action, you don't have to go there if you get in. It doesn't help that much statistically, but you're almost required to do it if you're applying to a public school as an out-of-state kid to competitive programs, engineering or business in particular. So early decision, early action. How much does early decision help? Well, these are all private schools. Those are all the schools. The only schools that have early decision are private schools, with the exception, I think, of William and Mary, and maybe one other public in Virginia that has it for whatever weird reason. But otherwise, all of the early decision schools are private schools. And early decision it gives the student an advantage. It really gives the university an advantage, though, because they get to pick from among students that are saying they will commit themselves, they will pay if they get in. And you get to really see a school's commitment to their bottom line by the difference between the RD admit rate, where kids aren't committing themselves and their money, and the ED admit rate, where kids are committing themselves. So Tulane University has always been one of the worst at this, in my experience. As far back as when I started in the late 90s, they were very, very bottom line oriented. And you see this, that you want a 70% plus chance of getting in, apply ED and commit yourself. You want to almost eliminate your chance, do anything but ED. And it's the same thing for Northeastern. Northeastern, the school that's number 53 in the country, that is admitting at 4 and 5%, 39% ED admit rate, and this is from 2 years ago, 4% RD admit rate. So this is going to be something where this past year, the RD admit rate is probably between 2 and 3%. With the overall being more along the lines of 5%. Northeastern taking over half of their class from the early decision pool. And this, goes downward as you see the multiplier for like the ED admit rate versus the RD admit rate. You'll see a lot of small liberal arts colleges will do this. Middlebury, Bates, Colby, Barnard. That's where you get a lot of mileage out of early decision, where you can really bump up the admit rates. With Bates, 42% RD, ED versus 10% RD. That's great. But again, you have to commit yourself there, and you eliminate your ability to consider other choices. If you apply early decision, you are getting a decision back usually by 12/15. You will not hear back from UC by around February, until around February or March. So you don't have the opportunity to evaluate decisions from UC. You don't have the ability to compare financial aid offers at a time when schools like Vanderbilt and NYU and USC are $100,000 plus. It's nice to be able to consider those. USC doesn't offer early decision though, so it doesn't make a difference. But long story short, you get a lot of mileage out of early decision at some schools like Tulane and Northeastern that are bottom line oriented, at a lot of smaller liberal arts colleges, even at a lot of big time top 30 schools like WashU and Cornell. Big multiplier there. And in most mid-level schools, like number 40s and plus, like BU, like Tulane, like Syracuse, like Santa Clara, you can get a lot of mileage out of ED. You get good enough numbers, you'll likely get in. got to pay though, and you can't compare the offers. But how did early help our students? How did it do with that? 2 out of our 3 Northwesterns were early. So that that obviously didn't hurt. Northwestern, as you see, is one of the schools that does take. What is not up here? Northwestern typically takes a good chunk from early. But I guess it's not, the multiplier isn't that high. It's usually about like 8-9% from regular, 16 to 19% from early. So it should be up here. Be a little low. But 2 out of 3 Northwestern, 1 out of our 2 Penn was early. 2 out of our 3 Carnegie Mellon were early, which I found surprising. Because Carnegie Mellon historically has not taken a lot of students. That has not, the early decision admit rate for Carnegie is usually not above the regular decision admit rate. And they've been very vocal over the past decade or so, or past 5 years, about saying we want to give everybody an equal chance. So we're getting rid of legacy admissions and we're getting rid of demonstrated interest. But it doesn't seem like they got rid of, wanting to see people commit their money. Because 2 out of 3 admits this past year, and one of them was SCS, was School of Computer Science. So great, such a massive win. The other one was stats and math, and the last one was something different. And 1 out of 2 of the Rice students that we had were admitted early. Rice has been really good for us over the past couple of years. It's been 4 years running now. We've had Rice admits. This is the first year we've had an ED applicant, and she was admitted. So Rice, especially for you life science folks, or you folks that are into petroleum engineering and want to do a lot of, tearing the earth apart looking for oil, Rice is the place to learn to do it. Everybody else though that we had, the Wash U, all the Wellesley, the Cornell, all were regular, which is again great, because you like to have people give options. We like to give people options. And the student, for instance, that was admitted like to Cornell, also admitted to Haas at Berkeley, and admitted to Michigan Ross. So had a lot of good options that she didn't use any leverage, but she could have, as far as the money and so forth. Trend number 4, early helps. I guess to early decision always helps. Or was, you commit yourself, it's going to wind up giving you an advantage. I really don't want to, especially for you current rising seniors, where you're the oldest in the family, and you haven't seen people go through this before. Everywhere you can, especially for public schools, you got to apply early action. Because the more you wait around, the more the seats run out, and that is especially the case with CS and engineering kids. And I tell everybody this a million times, so I know you're all sick of it. But if you're applying to like the standard litany of engineering schools, that are public, you're gonna have a bunch of schools you apply to by 11-1. It's not unusual for students to do Michigan, Purdue, Indiana, Texas, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, any number of other publics, 3, 4, 5 others, all of which you need to get in by 11-1. That's a lot of writing. Thankfully, those essays are typically boring and straightforward. What do you want to study, and what's been your favorite activity? It hasn't been something like, where's Waldo, like University of Chicago. It's very basic. So that's helpful, but you can't overestimate your own, writing efficiency, and you can't underestimate how quirky some of the questions can get. Virginia Techs are weird. Colorado's not the easiest thing, so you get the idea. So point is, early decision you can apply to 1, because you got to get in if you go, or you got to go if you get in. But early action you can apply to like 8 to 10 to 15, and early decision you can apply to more than 1 if it's early decision 2. But we won't get into that right now. But I guess I should. There's also, by the way, we've got 2 ways of applying early. I think most people know this. Early action, non-binding; early decision, binding. Both of these guys by 11-1. There's also something called early decision 2, which is, again, only at private schools and not at all of them. But early decision 2 is a January 1 deadline, usually, but it's exactly the same. Where if you get in, you got to go, and you get an enhanced chance of getting in if you apply under that plan. So this is the scenario that really illustrates early decision two best. A student has an interest in finance. They apply early decision one by 11/1 to UPenn, to the Wharton School of Business. On 12/15, December 15, they get an email from Penn saying, thanks, but no thanks. Sorry, it's not working out this year. You're denied. We're deferred. And the student goes, oh no, what can I do? I'm never going to be a success. And then NYU comes along and says, hey, we got business and economics and we're in New York and we also have early decision too. Why don't you try committing yourself to us? So early decision two was started, about 15 years ago by a couple of schools that were obviously preying on the panic of kids that didn't get into early decision one, and then everybody adopted early decision two, and they presented under the smoke and mirrors auspices of oh, you should maybe wait around a little bit to make sure you have the right test score or the grades are coming up. And it's like, no, it's not in the kids' interest to do it. It's you guys getting another round, another round to take kids in that are going to commit themselves and be guaranteed to yield. So sorry for the cynicism, I guess. No, not the most positive way of looking at things, but probably more realistic. So trend four, early. Early is all about private schools. So let's keep going with private schools. And this is something, when I was putting this together, I was thinking I basically said the same thing about UC. It's just a little bit different in private schools. A challenging curriculum, high test scores, and legitimate curiosity, often in the humanities and social sciences, and a few B's can be forgiven. I guess the big difference here is the test scores, but just to kind of give you an idea about this, with the University of California, there is a UC approved course list that gives everybody an idea of what counts for weight, what doesn't count for weight, what honors classes are weighted, and so on and so forth. Private schools don't have that. They don't have like a private school approved course list. So they're often depending on the counselor to tell them how rigorous the kid's curriculum is. So, just be aware that this is something that's on the Common Application. This is part of what's called the Common App School Report. And this is the way that the AOs are going to know how rigorous your son or daughter's curriculum is in the context of what's offered at the school. How many different types of classes the school offers, what proportion the students taken, and in comparison with other students, how rigorous is the student's course selection in this little section down here. And interestingly, there are some high school counselors that'll straight up tell the kids, if you take this many AP courses, I'll put in the most demanding course load. The counselors at Saratoga have done that over the past few years. So if you want to know exactly what the minimum is you have to take in order to qualify for the most demanding curriculum, there are some counselors that'll let you know. But the point is that private schools have ways of evaluating transcripts without necessarily knowing the high school super well. But most of the schools here, people are going to know well. Periodically you'll have like downtown college prep. They don't get a lot of students from there. Maybe they don't have a ton applying, or like some kind of like random school in the I don't know, Mountain House High School. But for the most part, schools in the Bay, colleges will, and schools not in the Bay that are well respected, will school they'll know them. But still, this is helpful for the AO. The point is that the harder the curriculum, the more forgiving the schools can be. So let's go into a couple of these guys, and some of them I've mentioned already. But this should give everybody, at least if you have any doubts about your transcript, these three illustrations, I mean, just shocking. The first one, the Carnegie Mellon, 8 Bs. And getting into Carnegie, that's like, and all of them, I think there may have been like one in ninth. The other seven were in 10th and 11th. The student had great rigor, though. I mean, it had good rigor, great curiosity, a bunch of leadership, random little leadership positions in school, out of school. It was one of those profiles that, like, boy, this guy could be a big winner or it could be an absolute disaster for him, and he wound up winning. So this, in spite of the comparatively, high number of Bs, That's still the rigor offset it, and I would say the real interesting curiosity of the student, how he got into a lot of different things, how he had positions of leadership in a lot of different organizations, not massive positions, but big enough to show that there was some legitimacy. It was a winner. Um, Wash U. This young lady, 6 Bs. I think one of them was during ninth again. The other two were during 10th and 11th. She won the award this year for the highest level of rigor. She just loaded herself up. Um, uh, um, I think Los Altos High School, from what I recollect, so took everything offered there. And then went bananas on classes at Foothill. And then lots of research. She was really, really good with that. Got to hit caught lightning in a bottle early in like in ninth grade and got Cosmos, and then was able to parlay that into additional positions as time went on. Um, uh, um, so she wound up being really, really good. Um, uh, um, at Northwestern, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. What was it? It's 3 Bs. Um, uh, but still, a massive numbers of a massive number of honors and AP weight. Like I said before, average for Berkeley and LA right around 23 or so, and that's already a really, really high. So you're looking at 26, and that's solid. Again, I don't think it always works. But I can't think of anybody that just had a massive number this year that really failed. But it doesn't always work because there are other things the schools are looking at, obviously, aside from the volume of AP courses, and college courses. But it has been something I've heard consistently over the past year, and I'm sure a lot of you have too. And that's one of the reasons why the schools, as I'm going to go to in a second, the schools are coming back to the SATs, is that there is the agreement, and some studies that have borne out the fact that there's been a lot of great inflation going on over the past couple of years. A lot of schools, as you may have heard, are disenchanted with the level of achievement of their freshmen, and are turning back toward the SAT. But without the SAT, and if the school was test optional, then you have to turn to the rigor, of the curriculum. So it does kind of make sense, I guess, when you look at it in that context, where there's a lot of great inflation out there, and the differentiating factor is going to wind up being with the with the rigor. All of these students, as you see, took the most demanding curriculum offered at their school, obviously. And the interesting thing of them is they all went in on the AP on the humanities and social science classes, which you have to if you're going to get this number. You can't dodge A Push and AP Gov and AP Econ and English 11H and AP Lang and AP Lit if you're going to wind up racking up 34 semesters during the course of high school of honors and AP credit. You got to take everything. So that fills dual role. Then you get to look like the rigorous person that's challenging themselves, as well as the Renaissance person that not only takes Calc BC but also A Push and AP Lit, AP Lang. Yeah. Okay. Good. Q&A. Good. What are these students' majors? Excellent question. The So for the Carnegie one, this was applied math. For the for the Wash U one, she had something going on in I think it was anthro. And for the Northwestern one, journalism. And that's the next one. The next thank you very much for queuing, for setting up this next slide, which is the trend 6, uncommon majors, which is accounts for a little bit of that, I'd say. Let me see. Hold on. What else? Do the numbers include community college classes? Yeah, excellent. Yeah, yes, they do. Totally. That's the big thing, is that, like, the girl from Los Altos High School that had, or Mountain View, I forget which one. But 34 semesters of honors and AP weight, she was like she's like a part-time student at Foothill. She was taking classes all the time there. But that's, again, I mean, you can I think it would be hard to reach that number without community college classes. I mean, maybe Harker offers, or like other fancy privates will offer, like a whole bunch of weighted advanced topic courses, or like AP Latin Virgil that not everybody else offers. But under standard public school curricula, you got to do scout and or the CCs in order to get to that level. Yeah, great question. And circling back to that other great question, what were these students' majors that got in with like 8 Bs? Not EECs. And that's something that the uncommon majors is not much that you can do about. Let me see. Emory was anthro. WashU, she may have been human biology, health and society, or bio and society. So not totally different, but still not EECs. Um, but you get an idea of some of these guys. There were, we had the litany of standard, majors, right? I mean, one of the we had 3 Northwesterns. One of them was not unusual. We had 3 Penns, 2 of them were not unusual. So it's something that, the majority, and all the Cals were a lot of the Cals were engineering, a lot of the USCs were engineering. But the not always the most standard stuff that students are going into. So two of the Northwestern ones. One journalism, the other legal studies. Journalism isn't easy to get into at Northwestern. Is it harder than arts and sciences? Kind of. I mean, it depends on who you wind up looking at. Still not a standard major. A higher threshold for admissibility, but not as many people applying. So that didn't hurt. Legal studies, the other one with Northwestern, and this was a student that really wanted to study computer science, but the computer science chops, the computer science resume was not there. What was there though was some social science stuff, was some history stuff. Student traveled quite a bit, under various kind of reasons, and had a good amount of background in cool kind of governmental analysis. So that worked out great. Can he change the computer science? Yeah, I mean Northwestern, it's a piece of cake to change. It's I'm trying to think of anything you couldn't change into. Maybe moving into but even then, no, moving into it's not even that hard there. It's really Northwestern's very flexible. And usually the way that it works with this is that if a school is super flexible on letting students change majors, then they're not going to be as inclined to punish a kid for applying to a really popular major. But everybody knows kind of what they're trying to do while building a well-rounded class. And there's only no matter how flexible the majors are and how easy it is to change the majors, you got 100,000 kids applying to CS, and you got to say wait, are we going to have this much space for that number of students? Obviously, I'm being melodramatic, but you get the idea. Okay, hold on, we got some more Q&A. How are admissions numbers for LNS and science versus engineering in Berkeley and LA this year? We don't know yet. We'll know in September when the UC Counselor Conference comes out. We know their overall numbers to a certain extent, but nothing more than that. What is the ranking for Northwestern? Northwestern's, I think, number 13 in the country. Maybe it's top 10 these days, but I think it's between 10 and 13. Northeastern, 53. Northwestern, between 10 and 13, kind of little Ivy, so to speak. So the West versus the East means a lot. But to return to the first one, admissions numbers for LNS versus engineering between Berkeley and LA. We don't know until the counselor conference in the middle of September when we get some data. And when that happens, that is something that we all talk about and that we talk about when we go over the UC applications, because it does come up, and there will be things between now and November 30th that will shape what you want to have as the UC major. Not everything, but enough changes where it's going to make a difference. For instance, one of the big changes 2 years ago was the movement from computer science in letters and sciences to its own division under the College of Computing and Data Science. That happened over the summer. The numbers come out for UC over the summer, and in the specifically in the UC Counselor Conference in September. So after that happens, I give everybody an update on how that's going to impact admissions. School majors that might be newly impacted that we want to consider, schools that might no longer be considering alternate majors with UC, where we want to make sure that we get into the primary major, and so on and so forth. So great question. No disaggregation yet. Yeah, we got that. Good questions. Always good questions. So again, geez, we're running behind. All right, that's fine. I'm about to get boring anyway, so we'll start moving towards wrapping up and taking questions. But in any case, So Northwestern, journalism, big pay and profession, and legal studies. Cornell, School of Hotel Administration. Hoteliers are not easily admitted, and you got to have a real niche profile, but it's not impossible to get that real niche profile if you want it. If you're willing to commit yourself to doing something in culinary stuff, hospitality, and hotel admin, there's jobs out there at Panera, at Paris Baguette. There's competitions in DECA that revolve around restaurants and hotels. Working at a restaurant, doing something in a food service capacity isn't impossible. There are summer programs out there and scholarships for stuff in hotel administration. The only problem is, if you don't hit Cornell, the next best option is UNLV. So, you're going to wind up going dead ahead for hotel admin. It's kind of all or nothing. But Cornell School of Hotel Administration, good win this year. Penn, one of the admits was a nursing boy. That helps. Nursing males, that's where that's the new engineering females. So yeah, you want to do something in healthcare admin, allied health professions, and you're a boy, physician assistant, nursing, and so on and so forth. Excellent question. The student who walked out of the ED commitment, will his or her offers from the other colleges be in risk of withdrawal? If no, that means no consequence to the student. Sounds like the impact of the high school instead of the student. Yes, indeedy. And a parent and I had a big question and a discussion about this a couple of months ago. And in the case of Harker and other private schools, the school can withhold the student's transcript. And there is some punitive action that at least the high school can take. In the case of public high schools, it doesn't seem like there is. Can the colleges take any punitive action? Well, if they were to find out about it, perhaps. Could they find out about it? I guess. Would a college that was trying to prove a point run the risk of breaching privacy agreements? And maybe getting themselves into more hot water than they bargained for, probably. Could there be something that would be, antitrust oriented about bringing this to the fore? Maybe. So I don't know how much colleges are willing to kind of gamble on something like this and really willing to put the kids' feet to the fire. They leave it up to the high schools, which in the case of private schools, it seems like the school has a little bit of recourse. In the case of the public schools, you got it. The university that got jilted will salt the earth and burn the crops and not take anybody from that high school for a minute. But the kid gets off a little bit scot-free. Maybe they might have to suffer the indignity of being called out by their friends and their friends' parents. So maybe a little bit of societal pressure, but other than that, not much. Yeah. Good question. Again, sorry for the cynicism. Emory, anthropology, Georgetown, psych, and nursing. Nursing was a girl in this case, so it was tough. So a lot can be said for her because the Georgetown admit rate to nursing is super low. The problem with all of these is almost like it is with the Cornell thing, that it's hard to serve two masters. The kid with Northwestern legal studies was trying to. He was trying to build enough of a CS profile and enough of a legal profile where he could go either way. Ultimately, the CS profile was not close to strong enough to be able to compete at Northwestern or any of the UCs. So he kind of went sort of dead ahead, the legal studies thing everywhere. But that's kind of the thing, is that in order to really make this convincing, you have to have a profile for it. You can't be a kid that's done USICO, has an internship doing debugging of software, does Beaver works at MIT, and takes all CS classes at Foothill, and then say, I'm really interested in gender studies. Unless you've got the track record for gender studies somewhere. And if you do, great. It's terrific that you've been able to juggle both of them. But usually students, there's enough going on. Trying to prepare for one major is enough. Trying to prepare for two in order to play the field, that is, that's tough. Can it be done? Yeah. Yeah. Is it for everybody? No, not really. Okay. Trend 7. So we got weird majors there. Trend 7. And this is probably to the joy of most people on this call, because most people do around here, I'm saying we test well, because I'm including myself in the group. We test well in the Silicon Valley, so this is really helpful and good. But it seems like, with the exception of UCs and Cal States that are for an indeterminate period going to be SAT, ACT blind. For everybody else, aside from the schools like Worcester Polytech and Caltech that are still that are still test blind, the tests are starting to matter more and more and more. None of our top 20 admits this year, aside from the UC admits, were kids that were going to withhold tests. And none of the top 20 admits outside of the UC kids had test scores lower than 1,500. And that's been something that's in the first waves of the pandemic, you got away from that a little bit, where you really schools were really like, we're test optional, we're not going to punish you if you don't submit one. It doesn't seem that way anymore. With the private schools, the top 20, top 25 private schools, nobody, got away with not submitting anything. The girl that got into Wash U did. Um, she went test optional. She didn't have anything there. But that's the one case and the best case that I've seen over the past several years. Everybody else, for UC, of course, test blind, it doesn't make a lick of difference. But for all the other guys, you want the test scores. And for the top 20, 1,500, that's something that everybody should be comfortable with, or everybody should know that that's kind of a threshold. Um, for the privates, for the big publics, if the for the big publics, those are the kids that are applying to engineering majors. You need the math score. Not for UC, but for everybody else, if you could have the math score, that helps. The overall composite, it doesn't have to be a 1,500, but you want the 760 or better in math, I'd say. Um, and we've got a number of schools that are coming back to test required over the past couple of months: Brown, Cornell, Dartmouth, Harvard, Yale. And like when the Ivies sneeze, the rest of college admissions catches a cold. So this is something where, the Ivies now making this, more Ivies making it mandatory than not. Over the next several years, we will be back to full on test required everywhere, I'd say, aside from UC and Cal States, and maybe a handful of liberal arts colleges. I get, some schools like Caltech holding out. I guess you can tell by the curriculum, I guess. But still, when you're applying, and Caltech doesn't have a massive applicant pool, when you've got like, UC blows my mind. They're doing it 140, 160,000 applications. You get like one piece of like, academic, objective academic data, objective, the transcript. It's still crazy. But then you look at like schools like Northeastern, NYU, they're getting 98, 100,000 applications. So, they need these things in order to provide this additional bit of, objective, you know, not really objective, but evidence. Um, so yeah. So the big takeaways here. The honors and AP count matters a lot to UC and to private. So the rigor is a big deal. You can get away with some Bs, but in all cases. But if you need to have the weight on there. Does that mean everybody should do it? I mean, like you're like, man, I've made it in 10th grade. I got nothing but Bs. In 11th grade, I should do A push, AP Lang, AP Calc BC, multivare. I don't even do both of those, but you get the idea. You still have to know yourself. It's not something, because you get nothing but Bs, and that's no good. But if you get a handful of Bs, and you've got the other rigor, it seems that it's okay. Um, Other takeaway: CS is tough, but not nearly as bad as it used to be. Um, uh, um, Not nearly as bad for us as last year. Let me clarify that. Can't speak for everybody else, but not bad for us at all. CS at out of state schools can be easier, but there are angles. You can't apply CS everywhere. At Illinois, CS by itself is still going to be a tough, admitting at 3% for out of state. Versus UIUC CS plus X program, which are admitting at about, I think, 20% overall, probably 15% out of state. So again, CS out of state can be easier. You just have to know what you're dealing with. Maryland, it seems like you're okay. Purdue could be tough. You got to make sure you have an alternate major. Yeah, yeah. Virginia Tech still accessible. ED can help, as usual. it helps the colleges more. I want to as as I get older and I have kids and I start thinking about like ROI of college, I've just become so much more, price sensitive on everything. But it is something that, at the end of the day, ED it's helping the students get into the school statistically, but the bottom line is helping the university. So, I'm not I used to push that a lot, but especially seeing like, since the pandemic, how much the cost of attendance have skyrocketed. It's like, oh, really gonna commit myself to that? Oh no. Um, be a little different in terms of interest. So having develop an interest overnight in gender studies, please. Obviously you can't control that, but if you did have, we do have interests where it's like, I could go either way. I want to do, I really want to get into college badly, and I could study computer science, or I could study gender studies, something like that. And I don't care. I just want to get into a good college. Then you go for the different major. Doesn't help everywhere, doesn't help all the time, but certainly doesn't hurt. And high test scores help for non-UC. And again, UC is going to be no good at that. Um, to give you an idea of where I see things kind of going over the next couple of years, I'd also like to give you an idea of like how my lousy predictions from last year. So my predictions from this presentation last year, even more of a roll of the test. Yes, that's definitely the case. And that's going in that direction. So got that one right. Last year's predictions, the wait list would not be as employed as extensively this current year as it was last year. It seems that that was the case. I haven't seen the numbers yet, but we had a lot fewer students this past year that were left twisting in the wind by Berkeley and LA. We still have a number that have the wait list thing going on, but especially with UC, they're getting the numbers a little bit more accurate since the deluge of applications came during the pandemic. Um, Liberal arts colleges will get more competitive, maybe soon, maybe at some point, but not over 1 year. And as it turns out, we had better liberal arts colleges this year than before. 3 to Wellesley, 1 to Colby, 1 to Brandeis, kind of a liberal arts college. So yeah, not much more competitive, but maybe sometime in the future. Um, Compelling involvement will be helpful, and leadership will continue to differentiate. One thing I didn't mention is that because it wasn't something that was super consistent, but it was consistent enough for me to bring it up now. Is that leadership positions they do help a lot. The big ones always help, but the middle of the road ones, like president of a club or something like that, it seems that those are helping more and more too. I've always said that with leadership, it's or not I've always said, but I've recently said leadership has a twofold function in college admissions. Number one, it reflects what college admissions officers want to see, because they've always loved leadership. And leadership is also turning into a blunt instrument where you just it's serving only to separate, one kid from another. So leadership is something that, at a mid-level, not necessarily ASB president or drum major or varsity captain, but at like club president level, things like that. Those are playing a role, it seems like, as well. Um, so for the coming year, my big bold predictions, half the top 25 will go back to test required. I think I think that's going to be the case. Why not? They need it. SAT has been remodeled, doesn't seem to be as, racist and classist as it once was. It just seems to be equally hard right now. So not as much of a third rail with the SAT. Um, uh, I'd say most schools are going to go back to it in order to help them out. Yeah, in order to help themselves out. Rigor and leadership continue to be big factors with UC. Um, Out of state publics are going to really rise in popularity, especially with CS. I mean, I've said this year that I said that CS worked out well for us this year, but again, small sample size and doesn't really reflect reality, I'm sure. Um, what we see and what I see more than anything else, a lot of because I promote it, is applying to schools that are out of state, that are somewhat affordable, that have the programs that you want. So that's why we have a lot of the college lists. They've got Pitt, they've got Purdue, which has a lower cost of attendance than UC. They've got Penn State, Michigan State, Illinois, NC State's up and coming in computer science, Utah up and coming in computer science and game design. These, as more and more public schools get tough with the CS, and I know that that's going to happen at some point, even with Wisconsin and Purdue and Maryland and Virginia Tech, you're going to have to turn to other schools. And I also think that schools with top specialized majors will rise in popularity. And what I mean by that is, Okay, let me see. And also, by the way, okay, I'll get the question just as an aside. Is receiving a prize or award helpful in applying to UC? Yes, it is. It depends on the level of award, but awards are among 13 criteria that are used by UC. It was something that when I was with UC, we would weigh extensively, especially based on the level of award. If it was regional or local, it was one thing. If it was state or national, it was another thing. If it was international, it was something else. So level of award, prestige of award, general, do people understand what this award is? Helps. The two awards that when I was with UC, we wouldn't give any weight for: CMEA awards, California Music Educators Association awards, and national merit. We wouldn't give any weight to that. And a lot of that goes back to UC's not having any respect for college boards. But the CMEA thing, I don't remember why we didn't wind up giving any weight to that. But everything else, for the most part, USACO to USABO to USAFO to Amy, no, to other stuff, to even to like athletic awards, it plays into the UC. It plays into UC quite a bit, and it plays into the other schools as well. Good question. Let me circle back to this last thing though, because it at least has some merit. Schools with top specialized majors will rise in popularity. I try and push these for students that already have an interest in business and in computer science and in any other professional field as well. If you already know what you want to go into, professionally speaking, you can get into a lot of places that will be good for your career that don't necessarily have the admit rate that would get you rejected. The best example I have this year, I didn't include his information in here, is a student from I think Doherty Valley. He was one of the San Ramon or Pleasanton schools. But his 10th grade, nothing but B's. I think one C. 11th grade, all A's, but not nearly enough to make up for the 10th grade of all B's and one C. And the kid he wanted to do business. He wanted to do finance. And dolled up the application, made it look good, got into UC San Diego, which was great, but also got into two other places that were almost as enchanting. And you're not going to understand why until I tell you. University of Indiana in Bloomington, Indiana, and Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. University of Indiana at Bloomington is for whatever reason, it feeds into finance, it feeds into investment banks. It's highly touted by recruiters. It's got a Bloomberg terminal on campus. They put people into internships on Wall Street. And it's got a 3.8 GPA and a 1380 on the SAT, and you're guaranteed admission to a top 10 finance program and a top 25 rated program by private equity firms. So that and Southern Methodist, same thing. Private school in Dallas, smaller school, but good with finance. And a lot of the stuff with business and finance, it goes back to like companies that are there as well as graduates, like Colgate, a liberal arts college, is great with finance because the CEO of Barclays went there. BYU, the all Mormon school in Provo. There's apparently a big financial consulting firm in Salt Lake City that as well as the connection between the grads has gotten that. And BYU, like, not a top 50 school. But you get the idea. And with computer science, it's similar. Arizona State. It's like, do you want to go to Arizona State? Probably not, but it's a top 50 CS program, a top 35 engineering program, a top 25 business program, a top 15 journalism program. Same with NC State, top 50 CS. Same with the University of Utah, like I said, where people are coming out with game design interests and good jobs. So the specialized majors, without the just going right after the ROI, I think that is going to happen more and more. The obvious one for that with computer science is San Jose State, but not everybody gets into San Jose State. I think the San Jose State average UC Cal State GPA is something like a 4.25, and I think Santa Clara residents get a 0.125 GPA boost for it. So a lot of Santa Clara residents are left out. So there's a reason why I'm saying outside of the Cal States, you might want to consider it, because SLO and SJSU are tough. So would it be worth it to go to a place like Utah? Maybe. Depends on how the money works out. But yeah, direct ROI. Yeah. Is it worth it to go to Purdue? Yeah, cheaper than UC for in-state. Is it worth it to go to Indiana? Probably. So the specialized majors, without the pedigree, without the fanciness, just good at what they do and good at getting people's jobs, I think that those are going to wind up getting much more popular. Okay. So those are my predictions for this year. My predictions also for this year is I would like to have students for their seniors nail down a couple of schools by June 1, so we can make sure that we get essays done by July 1, because we want to have the Common App essay and the UC essay done by July 1. That way we can make sure we move forward in all other applications. A lot of the students that we work with, because of where we're located, are interested in engineering and CS. And as I say to everybody, engineering and CS means you apply to more public schools. More public schools mean you apply to more schools early action. So it's not uncommon for students to apply to 5, 6, 7, 8 schools by November 1, which means we gotta move quick over the summer. So I'll follow up with everybody on this. I'll send some emails. Riley will send some harassing emails, and we'll get this sorted out. But just be aware that we're not trying to move early because we got to take vacation in August or something. It's like we want to move early because you guys are going to wind up having a bottleneck of like a bunch of terrible essay prompts that we're confronted with, in August and September, and we want to make sure that we get ahead of that. Um, Okay, and that's it. Thank you for your time. Boy, hour and 15 minutes, not bad. Um, uh, if anybody has questions, as you all know, I like to talk a lot, so I wouldn't be totally, surprised if everybody jumped ship now. But if you'd like to ask anything, I'd be happy to answer it. Um, you know, Not really entertainingly or in song form or anything, but I'll give you some input. Um, uh, um, but if there are not any other questions, it doesn't seem that there are right now, and people are probably hanging around. They're trying to see if they're going to be obligated to listen to something. Doesn't seem like there is anything going on. Nobody seems to have other questions. So if you do have questions, or if you would like a copy of this, to to watch at your leisure, then let me know and let Gabby know, and we'll shoot you one. And if you want any more data on the students, to the extent that it's not like disclosing any of their personal information, I'd be happy to do it. So just holler at me and ask. As I said, and as you don't need to know, I like talking. But doesn't seem like anybody has anything else, and everybody's been hanging around for an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm going to make this official. Thank you very much for your time. You can consider the presentation over. Follow up with me with any questions as you have them, and I'd be happy to get you copies and answer any questions. And thank you so much. It's a Sunday, it's Memorial Day. I'm amazed that everybody came out here, not watching a ball game or anything. Thank you all. Have a real good day.